For this lecture, we're going to create our generic double wishbone suspension rig. So what we want to do is open up the file we created in the previous, or two previous sections, and that's going to be under replacing empties, and we'll pick the last one that we did. So now we have this file open, we have our assemblies and our parts, and we want to create a generic double wishbone suspension. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the parts that we need for that. So we need a wheel assembly, we need a control arm, we need a shock, and we want independent steering. And I'm going to do Shift D and move all this down along the Y, about right there. And then we just kind of need to place things better. So I'm going to move my wheel assembly. I can move it with this alignment sphere. I'm going to move it out along the Y, or the X, I'm sorry, so that it's inside of 1 meter, about right there. You can see our grid lines here. I'm going to move our control arm to a little bit in front of the wheel, the center of the wheel, and I'm going to scale it down quite a bit. So something like that. And we need to move our steering down. Let's move it down here. And I'm going to align more or less our inner ball joint to the center of our inboard pivot point for our control arm. And the outboard looks like it's pretty well aligned already. So something like that. This doesn't have to be exact. And I'm going to move the shock somewhere about right here. All right. Now let's resize our shock. It looks way too big for what we're doing. And we need to move our control arm down because we have two control arms. We're going to have an upper and lower control arm. I'm going to select all this and isolate it. So I'm going to select it all and press Shift H. And let's go into a front view here. I'm going to move my shock a little bit out of the way so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to select this alignment sphere for the control arm. Then I'm going to press Control and Numpad++ to get all of its children and grandchildren. And then do Control D, or Shift D, sorry. And then move it along the Z axis. So we have our upper control arm. Like that. Now I can move my shock back where I want it in the front view. And I think I want it about right there. Let me move this down. Okay, so somewhere around right there. All right, now we need to do our connections. Actually, let's move this. Let's move this whole assembly along the Y so that, oops, we need to unhide everything so that it's more centered. Let me undo that. All right, let's unhide everything, and then let's move it all so that it's closer to this subframe here, or somewhere around right there. We can move our subframe down to right there. Okay, now we need to make our connections. So let's do that. Let's take our control arm axles, and we need to connect them to the subframe. Both of them. And we need to do our control arm ball joints and connect them to the upright. Right there. And for our steering, we need to connect our steering motor to the upright and our steering slider to the upright. Then we need to connect our outboard ball joint here to the upright. Now we need to connect our shock lower ball joint to the upright and our upper shock ball joint to the subframe, like that. All right, now we should be able to test it. Let's make this subframe passive for our test. Let's Control S And it looks like it's working, although our preload motor is reversed. So let's just rotate that RY 80 and press Control S, save it, and there we go. So it looks like it's working. Okay, before we start testing this, we actually need to set up our controller here, our drivers for that. So what we need to do is come to our subframe and add drivers to these first 5 custom properties. So I'm just going to do var here, and it's going to be a single property var, and we can pick our controller, and we can target the Excel for this one. Okay. And now we have a driver there. Let's just copy this driver and paste it in all 5 of these. And we'll just have to go in and edit them. So edit the driver. Instead of Excel here, we want brake. And instead of parking brake, we want, or instead of Excel, we want parking brake. There we go. And instead of Excel here, we want steering. And instead of Excel here, we want target speed. So let's do that. All right. So hopefully that all works. Now we can save it and try it. And let's see if our steering is working now. It is. Has a little too much movement, but that's okay. We'll change that when we set it up for the jalopy.